Jonah Pierce never planned on falling for his boss. In fact, he had promised himself he would never even like him. But promises have a cruel way of breaking themselves, especially on the kind of morning where everything feels so perfectly wrong. And maybe that explains why, by lunchtime, he found himself wishing he could be the 99th Omega instead of the one rejecting her. Jonah had always been good at pretending. Pretending he was fine. Pretending he was unaffected. Pretending that working for a man like Adrian Hale was just another line on his resume. But the truth looked nothing like the facade he carried. The truth was sharper, messier, and infinitely more painful. The truth was that Jonah had been in love with the man for 2 years. The elevator doors slid open, and Jonah adjusted the folder under his arm, pushing away the pathetic hope bubbling in his chest. He stepped into the gleaming hallway of Hale Industries, where everything smelled like polished ambition and disinfected perfection. Adrian's office waited at the end of the hall, its glass doors reflecting the skyline like a barrier he'd never be allowed to cross. Inside, Adrian was doing what he always did on Tuesdays, rejecting another Omega. "Jonah," Adrian said, looking up from his desk. His dark eyes softened the way they always did when they landed on him, and Jonah hated how easily the world inside him cracked open. "Number 99, Jonah replied, holding up the file. "She's in the conference room." Adrian exhaled, long and tired. "And what's the verdict before I walk in?" Jonah allowed a wry smile. "She brought cupcakes. Gluten-free, vegan, and heartbreakingly optimistic." Adrian groaned. "Hell, why are the optimistic ones always vegan?" "Maybe God hates you," Jonah suggested with a shrug. "Statistically likely." For one wild moment, Jonah let himself enjoy the banter, the easy warmth that curled between them like a quiet secret. Then reality slid back in like cold water. Adrian wasn't his. Adrian would never be his. Omegas lined up for this man like he carried salvation in his pockets. And maybe he did. Adrian Hale was smart, devastatingly handsome, and so painfully good inside that Jonah sometimes had to look away just to breathe. But Adrian was also an alpha. And Jonah was not. Not an Omega. Not a match. Not even a possibility. He followed Adrian to the conference room, silently coaching himself into emotional numbness. He had become very good at that. Good at taking Adrian's kindness and pretending it didn't hurt. Good at shielding his emotions behind a professional mask so polished it could reflect a lie back at him. Inside, the Omega candidate sat poised, her smile hopeful. Adrian gave her 5 minutes. Jonah watched the familiar pattern unfold. Polite greetings, careful questions, long pauses that said more than words ever could. And then, at the inevitable end, Adrian's gentle decline. He rejected her with grace. He always did. He always tried to soften the fall. Jonah was the one who handled everything after. He walked her out, reassured her, offered empathetic words he'd memorized hundreds of times. He was good at comforting hearts he secretly envied. When he returned to the office, Adrian was staring at the city like it held answers. Didn't. Jonah doubted anything could. "She was nice," Adrian murmured. "They usually are." She wasn't right. They also usually aren't. Adrian turned to face him. Something unguarded flickered in his expression. Something Jonah had no business wanting to understand. "Does it ever make you think," Adrian said quietly, "that maybe there's something wrong with me?" Jonah's throat tightened. "No," he answered immediately. "You said that too quickly. You asked a stupid question too quickly." The corner of Adrian's mouth lifted. Just a fraction. Just enough to undo Jonah all over again. He needed to leave. The more time he spent near Adrian, the more dangerous his heart became. And today, watching Omega after Omega fall short of something Jonah knew he could never be, something inside him finally broke. So when Adrian stepped into his meeting, Jonah went back to his desk, stared at the resignation letter he'd written and deleted 100 times, and finally printed it. Maybe this was the only way to survive loving a man who would never look at him that way. He set the letter on his desk, then hesitated. His gaze drifted toward Adrian's office. The door was closed, the blinds half drawn. Shadows danced across the floor like unspoken memories. Jonah took a slow breath, walked inside, and placed the envelope on Adrian's desk. He didn't allow himself to overthink it. Didn't allow himself to imagine Adrian's reaction. Didn't allow himself to picture the hurt, the confusion, the realization that Jonah was leaving. He just set it down and walked away. He grabbed his bag, straightened his jacket, and forced his legs forward until he was through the glass doors and into the elevator. As the doors closed, the world above him stayed frozen in a place he desperately needed to forget. By the time Adrian returned to his office, Jonah was already gone. And when Adrian saw the empty desk, the untouched coffee, and the envelope waiting for him like a quiet betrayal, something inside him shattered. "Jonah," he whispered. His voice cracked. He wasn't ready for the truth waiting inside the letter. He wasn't ready to face the fact that the only person he could imagine trusting, relying on, maybe even needing, had walked out without a word. He wasn't ready for the sudden realization that somewhere between 99 rejections and the endless conversations they shared, he had fallen in love with the one person he thought he could never have. And he wasn't ready to lose him. Not Jonah. Never Jonah. Adrian grabbed his coat and bolted toward the elevator, heart pounding with a fear he hadn't felt in years. The kind that comes when you realize you've been blind. The kind that comes when it's already almost too late. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Taxi horns, blurring lights, people moving in every direction except the one he needed. Jonah was somewhere out there, and Adrian would tear apart the entire city before he let him disappear. But Jonah wasn't running. Not really. He simply walked with the weight of 2 years pressing into his spine, the resignation of loving someone from shadows and learning to let go. He didn't expect Adrian to come after him. He didn't expect anything at all, because hope was a dangerous thing, and Jonah Pierce had already bled enough for it. As he stepped onto the street, the cool wind brushed against his skin, carrying a sting that felt too much like goodbye. 2 years. 2 years of loyalty, devotion, silent longing, gone in a single envelope. Jonah told himself not to regret it. He failed. He told himself not to look back. He failed worse. Behind him, the skyscraper loomed like a monument to everything he was leaving behind. He swallowed hard, turning away, ready to step into a future that felt both terrifying and painfully empty. But fate often enjoys being inconvenient, and Adrian Hale was nothing if not relentless. The moment Adrian burst through the revolving doors, breathless and wild-eyed, the world seemed to snap into place with brutal clarity. He spotted Jonah immediately, and Jonah froze. For the first time in his life, Jonah saw Adrian not as his boss but as a man terrified of losing something he never knew he could lose. "Jonah," Adrian called. His voice carried across the busy sidewalk, slicing through noise and distance like something inevitable. Jonah's heart stuttered. He knew this moment would hurt. He didn't know it would hurt like this. Adrian reached him, chest rising and falling with urgency. "Why did you leave?" Jonah swallowed. "You read the letter." "No," Adrian said. "I felt it." Jonah blinked. "That doesn't make sense." "It does," Adrian insisted quietly. "It makes too much sense." And just like that, the world around them faded into a blur of traffic and footsteps. Adrian took one step closer. Jonah didn't move. He couldn't. And everything he tried to bury rose to the surface like a truth too heavy to contain. Jonah had imagined 1,000 scenarios where Adrian confronted him. None of them looked like this. None of them involved Adrian standing in the middle of a crowded Manhattan sidewalk, tie askew, hair wind swept, panic thick in his eyes as though Jonah were an oxygen mask he'd lost mid-flight. "You can't just disappear," Adrian said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and something far more fragile. "You don't get to walk out without telling me why." Jonah exhaled shakily. "Adrian, you know why?" "No," Adrian shot back. "I don't. Because if I understood, I wouldn't be standing out here like a man who's suddenly realized he's been living blind." Jonah stiffened. People passed by them, weaving through the emotional wreckage they were creating without even noticing. A street performer played guitar on the corner. A siren echoed distantly. The world moved, unaware that Jonah and Adrian were standing at the edge of something that could break them both. "You don't need me," Jonah whispered. Adrian stared at him as if the words were offensive. "Don't need you? Jonah, I rely on you more than I rely on anyone in my life." "That's not the same," Jonah said, shaking his head. "Depending on me isn't the same as wanting me." Something flickered in Adrian's expression, a crack in the armor. Jonah forced himself to step back. If he didn't leave now, he never would. "I can't keep pretending," Jonah said softly. "I can't keep holding everything together for you while falling apart myself." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Jonah, look at me. I am. Then tell me the truth." Jonah hesitated. He could lie. He had practice. He could hide behind professionalism, behind boundaries, behind the safety of silence. But something about Adrian standing there like a man whose entire world was about to collapse forced the truth out of him. "I left," Jonah said, voice barely a whisper, "because I'm in love with you." The air punched out of Adrian's lungs. For a second, he genuinely looked like someone had reached inside him and rewired his heart. "You're joking," Adrian said, breathless. Jonah let out a humorless laugh. "I wish I were." "Jonah, I can't do it anymore," Jonah interrupted, all his strength flickering like a dying flame. "I can't stand in your office every day, watching Omega after Omega fall for you, knowing I'll never be one of them. I can't keep pretending your smile doesn't tear me apart. I can't keep loving you from a distance that keeps stabbing me in the same place." Adrian's fingers twitched, like he wanted to reach for him but didn't know how. "I thought leaving was the only way to breathe," Jonah whispered. "The only way to stop wanting something I can't have." Adrian stepped closer. "Who told you that you can't have me?" Jonah froze. "Adrian, you're wrong," Adrian said, voice raw. "You've been wrong this whole time." Jonah blinked, confused. "You're an alpha. You're expected to bond with an omega." Adrian shook his head. "Expected by who? My board? My mother? A society that doesn't understand me?" He exhaled, chest tight. "Jonah, I've rejected 99 omegas because none of them were right for me. None of them felt like anything." "You're saying that like I'm saying it," Adrian cut in, "because you're the only person who makes sense." Jonah's heart stopped. "But you never, how could I?" Adrian said, voice thickening. "Every time I looked at you, I felt like the ground moved. Every time you brushed past me. Every time you said my name. Every time you laughed at something I said. I almost gave everything away." He dragged a hand through his hair. "I couldn't take the risk. Not when you're the one person I can't lose." Jonah stared at him, his breath forming small white clouds in the early autumn air. "You don't mean that," he whispered. "I do," Adrian said softly. "More than anything." Anger and longing collided inside Jonah like clashing weather fronts. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Adrian's voice cracked. "Because I thought you'd run." Jonah let out a shaky laugh. "Spoiler alert. I ran anyway." A slow, tentative smile touched Adrian's lips. "Yeah, not my best day." Jonah exhaled through a broken, half-hysterical laugh, the kind that came from the edge of emotional collapse. "Adrian, this doesn't change anything," he said, though his chest ached with the hope clawing up his ribs. "You still have responsibilities. You still have expectations. You can't throw all of that away just because I confessed something stupid." "It isn't stupid. It feels stupid," Jonah said. "It feels pathetic and messy and impossible." Adrian reached out. Jonah instinctively stepped back, but Adrian didn't stop until he was close enough that Jonah could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Look at me," Adrian whispered. Jonah's eyes lifted on instinct. Adrian took a careful breath, as though the next sentence held the weight of his entire life. "I love you too." The world went silent. The city blurred. The sidewalk disappeared. The street noise dissolved into background static. Jonah shook his head, not trusting what he'd heard. "Adrian." "I mean it," Adrian said. I've been in love with you longer than I want to admit. Jonah stared at him, words refusing to form. But you can't just say that, Jonah finally whispered. Not like this. Not out of nowhere. It isn't out of nowhere, Adrian said. It's been years of nowhere. Years of denying, avoiding, convincing myself I'm imagining everything because you're my assistant. And if I reached for you and you turned away, I'd lose more than my career. I'd lose you. Jonah's knees felt unsteady. Do you understand what that would do to me? Adrian asked quietly. Losing you? I can't even picture it without feeling sick. Jonah's throat tightened painfully. You're serious. Deadly. Jonah looked away, overwhelmed. This is too much. I know. We're standing on a sidewalk. I know. And you're telling me you're in love with me while a guy in a lobster costume is crossing the street. Adrian glanced over Jonah's shoulder. That is a lobster costume. Wow. Jonah let out a strangled laugh, folding forward slightly as tears pricked his eyes. Adrian reached out instantly, gently brushing Jonah's cheek with his thumb. Jonah didn't pull away this time. You can't leave, Adrian whispered. Don't make me go back to that office without you. Jonah closed his eyes. This was everything he wanted, everything he feared, everything he'd convinced himself he could never have. I don't know how to do this, Jonah admitted. We figure it out, Adrian replied. Together. You say that like it's simple. It's not. Adrian took his hand. But I'm choosing you. And I want you to choose me back. Jonah's breath caught. The city rushed around them in streaks of motion, sound, and color. But in that moment, nothing existed except Adrian's hand in his, warm and trembling with hope. Adrian, Jonah said softly. If I stay, you need to understand something. Anything. I'm not an omega. I'll never be the perfect match you're expected to have. Adrian squeezed his hand. Good. I don't want perfect. I want real. Jonah's chest tightened. And you? Adrian continued, voice steady now. Are the most real thing in my life. Jonah opened his eyes. The honesty in Adrian's gaze hit him with full force. Okay, Jonah whispered. Adrian blinked. Okay. Jonah nodded slowly. I'll stay. A breath escaped Adrian's lungs like relief and joy and disbelief tangled together. He stepped forward as though pulled by gravity itself and pressed his forehead gently against Jonah's. Thank you, he murmured. Jonah closed his eyes, warmth blooming under his ribs. But then Adrian's phone buzzed sharply against his jacket. They both froze. Jonah pulled back slightly. You should answer that. Adrian looked at the screen and winced. It's my mother. Jonah choked out a laugh. Oh God, definitely answer that. Adrian groaned, stepping aside. Jonah watched him talk, watched him shift back into the confident CEO persona the world knew him for. But something was different now. Softer, lighter, hopeful. When Adrian hung up, Jonah raised a brow. Everything okay? No, Adrian said honestly. But none of it matters right now. Do you want to go back to the office with me? Jonah hesitated, heart thudding. You don't have to decide right now, Adrian added quickly. We can walk, talk, take our time. Jonah looked at him for a long moment. You came running after me, Jonah said quietly. I'd do it again. That's new. Adrian smiled, a real one, the kind Jonah rarely saw. Get used to it. Jonah inhaled a shaky breath. Then yeah, he finally whispered. I'll walk with you. Adrian's shoulders relaxed with visible relief. He reached for Jonah again, but stopped midway, uncertain. Jonah solved the problem by slipping his hand into Adrian's. Adrian's eyes widened. Is this okay? Jonah asked. Adrian nodded once, too slowly, too softly. More than okay. And with the city swirling around them, they walked down the sidewalk together, hand in hand, like something new was blooming between them, raw, fragile, and full of possibility. Jonah didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in 2 years he wasn't afraid. Adrian glanced sideways at him with a smile that felt like sunrise, and Jonah let himself smile back. For now that was enough. The walk back to the office felt nothing like the countless mornings and evenings Jonah and Adrian had shared side by side. Those walks had been filled with silence, careful distance, and the heavy ache of unspoken yearning. But now, with their fingers interlaced and the city breeze brushing around them, everything felt disorientingly, beautifully new. Jonah's heart raced at every accidental brush of their shoulders, at every tiny squeeze of Adrian's hand, at every moment their eyes met. It felt unreal, fragile, almost dreamlike to walk like this. But it also felt right in a way that echoed down to his bones. Adrian, for once, seemed almost shy. The powerful CEO who could negotiate multi-billion-dollar mergers now kept glancing at their connected hands like he couldn't quite believe Jonah wasn't going to vanish if he blinked. It made Jonah's chest tighten with a warmth he'd spent years burying. "You keep staring," Jonah murmured, breaking the quiet. "I'm not staring," Adrian protested. "You are. I'm observing. That's worse." Adrian huffed a laugh, gaze lingering on Jonah longer than necessary. "I just didn't think I'd ever get to do this. Hold my hand." "That," Adrian said, "and everything else that comes with it." Jonah's breath caught, a faint heat blooming across his cheeks. It was confusing how easily Adrian's sincerity could undo him. They approached the massive glass building of Hale Industries, and Jonah instinctively slowed. The last time he'd walked out of these doors, he'd believed it was forever. Adrian noticed his hesitation immediately. "We don't have to go in," he said softly. "Not yet." Jonah shrugged. "You still have a company to run." "And you," Adrian replied, "are not an employee right now. You're someone I want to talk to without glass walls and board members breathing down my neck." Jonah bit back a smile. "Then where do you want to go?" Adrian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tugged gently on Jonah's hand, leading him down the block, away from the office. Jonah followed without resistance, curious and slightly nervous. They walked in silence for a few minutes until Adrian stopped at a quiet park just a few streets away from the business district. It wasn't large or particularly special, but it was peaceful, lined with old oak trees, dotted with benches, and half hidden from the street by tall bushes. A pocket of calm in the chaos of Manhattan. Adrian guided Jonah to a bench tucked beneath the shade of a tree. "Sit with me," Adrian said. Jonah sat. Adrian sat closer than he ever had before. Their arms brushed. Their knees bumped. Jonah felt every point of contact like sparks under his skin. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just breathed, existing in a shared space that felt charged and delicate. Finally, Adrian said, "I should explain." "No," Jonah said immediately. "You don't owe me anything." "I do," Adrian said firmly. "You deserve honesty. You always have." Jonah turned toward him, waiting. Adrian exhaled. "Every time an Omega came into my office, and there were so many, you were the person I was thinking about." His voice grew quieter. "It wasn't fair to them. It wasn't fair to you. And it wasn't fair to myself. But I didn't know how to stop." Jonah tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. Adrian continued. "I rejected 99 Omegas because none of them felt like home." His eyes met Jonah's. "But you did. You always have." Jonah swallowed hard, his heart pounding painfully. "You think I'm exaggerating," Adrian said. "I don't know what to think," Jonah confessed. "This is a lot. It's everything I wanted, and it still feels like a trap my emotions set for me." Adrian's jaw tightened, as though he hated that Jonah had ever been hurt enough to think that way. "I don't want to confuse you," Adrian said softly. "I want to make things clear." "How?" Jonah whispered. Adrian reached up, hesitated, then gently touched Jonah's cheek. The touch was tentative, reverent, almost trembling. Jonah leaned into it without meaning to, breathing in sharply at the warmth of Adrian's palm. "This," Adrian said quietly, "is real." Jonah's eyes fluttered shut. "Then why does it scare me?" "Because you weren't supposed to love me," Adrian said. "And I wasn't supposed to love you. But we did anyway." Jonah let out a shaky laugh. "That's terrible planning." "Awful," Adrian agreed. But I'm not losing you because of rules that were written for someone else's life. Jonah opened his eyes. Adrian was close. Close enough that Jonah could feel every exhale. Close enough that Jonah could see the faint uncertainty behind the confidence. Adrian leaned forward slightly. Can I kiss you? Jonah froze. Adrian blinked. Too soon. Jonah whispered. No. I just didn't expect you to ask. I'm trying to be respectful, Adrian said. I'm new at this part. Jonah breathed out a trembled laugh, his whole body buzzing. Then yes. Adrian's eyes softened. Slowly, like he was giving Jonah every chance to pull away, he leaned in. The first touch of their lips was impossibly gentle, tentative, careful. But the moment contact was made, something inside Jonah shattered and melted at the same time. Adrian tasted like mint and the tension of years finally breaking open. Jonah inhaled sharply against Adrian's mouth, and Adrian pulled him closer, fingers sliding to the back of Jonah's neck. The kiss deepened, not desperate, but full of aching affection and unspoken longing. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a promise, a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, Jonah's breath trembled in the cool air. Wow, Adrian whispered, voice hoarse. Jonah blushed hard enough to feel it down his spine. Yeah, wow. Adrian laughed softly, brushing his thumb over Jonah's cheek. I've wanted to do that for so long. Jonah's heart swelled. Why didn't you? Adrian hesitated, then said, because I was afraid you didn't want me back. Jonah snorted. Adrian, I practically memorized the sound of your footsteps like some tragic Victorian ghost. Adrian stifled a laugh. That's adorable. Don't call it adorable. It's extremely adorable. Jonah covered his face. This is mortifying. Adrian gently tugged his hand away. No, this is beautiful. The sincerity in his voice silenced Jonah completely. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. No words, no masks, no distance. Then Adrian cleared his throat. So, there's the matter of your resignation. Jonah groaned. Let me be clear. That was supposed to be symbolic, dramatic, emotional. It was all of those things, Adrian said. I aged 5 years when I saw it. You didn't read it? Jonah asked. Adrian shook his head. I was too busy sprinting down 27 floors looking for you. Jonah's chest tightened painfully. You really did that? My lungs are still angry. Jonah laughed, warmth flooding his chest. Adrian reached for him again, intertwining their fingers. I don't want you to quit. I figured, Jonah teased. But not because I need you as an assistant, Adrian said. Jonah arched a brow. Oh, because I need you, Adrian said simply. Outside the office. In my life. Not behind a desk that forces you to call me sir. Jonah flushed. Okay. But sometimes I call people sir when I'm annoyed. Oh, Adrian said with a devious smile. We might have to explore that later. Jonah shoved him lightly. Stop. Make me. Don't tempt me. Adrian grinned, but then softened. Seriously though, we should talk about what this means. Professionally. Jonah nodded. I know. Dating your boss is messy. Adrian squeezed his hand. Then we'll make sure you're not my employee anymore. Jonah blinked. Wait, what? I'm offering you a promotion, Adrian said. Different division. Flexible hours. Higher pay. Zero direct reporting to me. He paused. And full freedom to tell me if I'm being an idiot. Jonah blinked again. I get paid more to insult you? Yes, Adrian said proudly. It's my dream. Jonah laughed, overwhelmed and flustered. That's a lot. Too much, Adrian asked, suddenly worried. Jonah shook his head. No, it's just that no one's ever chosen me like this. Adrian's face softened in that dangerous way that made Jonah feel seen in ways he never expected. Then let me be the first. Jonah felt his throat tighten. He squeezed Adrian's hand, grounding himself. Okay, he whispered. I'll take the promotion. And the boyfriend? Adrian added carefully. Jonah's breath caught. He looked up, searching Adrian's eyes, warm, hopeful, terrified in the quietest way. Yes, Jonah whispered. I'll take the boyfriend too. Adrian let out a breath that sounded like pure relief. He leaned in and kissed Jonah again, soft, slow, grateful. When they parted, Jonah rested his forehead against Adrian's. So what happens now? Adrian smiled. Now, I take you to dinner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere nice. Fancy restaurant? Jonah teased. No, Adrian said, shaking his head. Somewhere we can talk. Somewhere we can just be us. Jonah felt warmth surge through his chest. Sounds perfect. They stood, still holding hands. As they walked out of the park, Jonah glanced at the towering building of Hale Industries in the distance. It no longer felt like a cage of expectations. Felt like a beginning. Adrian looked at him. You okay? Jonah smiled softly. Yeah, I think I finally am. Adrian intertwined their fingers tighter. Good, because I plan to make you happier than you ever thought possible. Jonah laughed. That's a bold claim, Mr. Hale. Adrian grinned. Watch me prove it. And with the sun dipping behind the New York skyline, bathing the city in golden light, Jonah walked beside the man he once believed he could never have, no longer in silence, no longer in longing, but in a love that felt terrifyingly, beautifully right. A love that, after 99 wrong turns, finally found its way. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.